Welcome back to the Metamorphosis Journals. Before I get into this next installment, I wanted to give a little background on these lost journals and how this project came about. Obviously, if you've listened to the first few installments, there were already red flags, but I never would have believed I'd end up sitting in the office of a domestic abuse organization with an emergency escape bag packed in my car. And it took a really long time, but when I finally left and I had a peaceful home and space for my own thoughts, and I was trying to make sense of what had happened, and I just felt compelled to document how I got from meeting someone who made me feel so loved to being scared for my life. And I kept saying to those in my life that I wanted to figure out how to turn this into a book or a story to shed light on how these situations can escalate. But I did not trust my memory or how I would be able to document so much of the past 20 years. My sense of self and reality was so impaired. And there were times in my marriage I would talk to one of my siblings and mention Jim and I had a fight. And when they would ask what it was about, I couldn't quite remember. The details were foggy. It was disconcerting, and it was like I would have this amnesia after these fights. And even more than that, there were things that I was too ashamed to share with anyone. I felt like I would be betraying my marriage to tell others about his behavior, so there were times I stayed silent to protect him. But in this new peaceful life, I started to write down what I could remember, but I was missing so many details. It was on my birthday. I got a call from my little sister, and she was taking a tarot class, and she asked if she could do a card reading for me with one of her oracle decks. Not something was really in my orbit, and I was like, sure, let's do it. So she pulls a card for me for my past, present, and future. And the first two were eerily fitting. I can't remember what they were, but I remember being a little stunned. And then she pulls the future card, and it says that I've been silent for so long and it's time to be heard. And the card gave me chills. I kept so much of my story to myself and kept saying I wanted to share it. But honestly, even after that, didn't give it much thought. But the next day, I was emptying the last few boxes from my move, and I opened one of them to find dozens of journals where I had recorded many, many events and times in my life. I had written in them and never thought about them again. I start flipping through the pages and I am just shocked by how much detail is in there. I call my mom and my sisters and I excitedly tell them, I think my story has already written itself. I had been talking about writing a book for a while, and these journals were just what I needed to fill in the blanks. And it was that very night, around midnight, I'm getting ready for bed when I see the edge of a piece of paper sticking out of a drawer in my bedroom. I pull it out. It's a full letter-sized piece of paper in my handwriting. It looks like a stream of conscious journaling exercise that I'd done in the past, but I have no recollection of. And there's some, language about how I would be fine and make it through my divorce. And then the words, buy yourself some new pens and journals. Your book may have already written itself, Maggie. So these signs, sparked with my overwhelming desire to help shed light on the insidious nature of toxic and emotional abusive relationships, are what led me to share my story and start this channel. And with that, the flashback continues. We transplant our family to the East Coast when the boys are 1 and 3, moving into Jim's mom's house for a couple months to get our bearings. The culture shock sets in quickly. A couple days after we arrive, Jim celebrates a birthday and is gifted a wardrobe of pastel golf attire and a collection of golf balls. And at the time, I imagine it would be as shocking as Jim's dad arriving in San Francisco to gifts of tie-dyed shirts and a bag of weed. Within a few months, Jim gets a great job. We find this nice little house with a bit of a yard, within walking distance to a library and shops, restaurants. I'm able to keep my job working from home, but it's really challenging to find time to work while taking care of the boys. And I'm also responsible for all the bills, the banking, the taxes, the insurance, the kids' activities, the shopping, cooking, cleaning, doctor visits, etc. I'm really surprised at how much Jim works. Technically, his hours are 7:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m., but he leaves around 6 a.m. most mornings, and many nights he isn't home till 8 or 9 p.m., some nights much later. I speak to him about it several times, but he is incredibly annoyed and tells me how I don't understand how hard the learning curve is for his job and how unsupportive I am. One time he responds by saying, come on, it's not like you're some lonely housewife or something, but I'm very lonely. I am more financially dependent than I've ever been, thousands of miles away from my family and support system. I distract myself from the loneliness by keeping myself so busy I don't have time to think about it. I bake bread, cook elaborate dinners, take hikes, paint the house, plan outings and craft projects with the kids. But I miss my home and family desperately. The winter hits and it is frigidly cold. There are many days when the high temperatures peak in the single digits. Getting the kids out the house into their winter gear is an epic battle. I've never had to do this for myself, let alone little ones who fight me every step of the way. And the cabin fever is excruciating. But over time, as spring emerges and things thaw, I begin meeting people. But I'm kind of a fish out of water, and I have this self-conscious awareness that I come across like a snob for my love of fresh food and wine. And I invite one of my son's classmates and his mom over for lunch one day, and she acts like I'm kind of insane when I serve her quinoa salad and home-baked bread. And I was in the land of hoagies, wings, and beer now. But this is how I've always been. Back home in San Francisco, getting boxes of fresh food from a local farm and cooking from scratch is just the norm. This is how I cooked and lived when we were living in San Francisco. And I thought this was something that Jim valued in me and a value we shared. But now my husband laughs at me for this snobbery, making me feel silly for my crunchy ways. And now that we're seeing more of his old friends, I start to hear stories that seem at odds with the gentle soul I believe I had married. Tales of drunk driving, totaling cars, getting picked up by the police, his dad, a lawyer, swooping in to get him out of trouble. Now, at this point, Aiden is beginning to mellow and get easier, but Sean is no longer a dreamboat and becoming more difficult by the day. He is into everything. Some highlights from my journals include climbing fences, falling downstairs, dunking my toothbrush in the toilet, eating a stick of sunscreen, regularly pulling the contents out of his diaper and spreading it all over the house, peeing in my water glass, squeezing his arm behind a heavy dresser and sticking his finger in an electrical outlet, silently walking out the front door, or hiding under a jacket in the closet while I frantically look for him. When I reprimand him, he would throw his head back, close his eyes, and laugh. I am stretched to my limit trying to balance kids and work and all of the housework. And Jim is working so much that even on our wedding anniversary, he leaves at 6 a.m. and comes home from work at 11 p.m. No flowers, no card, no presents. And, well, pretty much this whole series is pulled from my journals. This is a direct quote from my journal at that time. I wish we hadn't moved. I feel like Jim is a different person than the man I married. He's much more materialistic and concerned about what people think. He treats me like my earthy views and ways are laughable and crazy. This is who I've always been. Am I going to grow up and find my views have changed? I am so lonely. I'm so far away from my family. I feel like I've lost my best friend. I don't know who he is. I am so sad. I feel I just want to go away and be alone. I feel so trapped by my life. And there's this entitlement that is becoming really surprisingly common in our relationship. One morning I get up with the kids at 6 a.m. and I make scones, get them settled for the day, and Jim sleeps till 11 a.m. I thought I was being nice, letting him sleep in, but when he comes downstairs and I ask him to watch the kids so I can shower and get dressed, he looks at me with complete annoyance and says, "Fine, I guess I just have to eat my scones while watching the kids." A year or so after settling in the East, I start belly dance lessons again. I'm performing at a few festivals, and I never thought I would dance professionally, but I'm offered a dancing gig at a local restaurant after performing at a party with friends. I say no, but they continue to ask, and one night I'm in my sweats cooking dinner when the owner of the restaurant calls and says a family is there celebrating their kid's birthday, and they're really disappointed because they thought there would be a dancer, and would I please come to a short show. It's just 5 minutes from the house, so I say yes. I run in and I find something to wear. Jim is really supportive. He burns a CD of music for me. I go from a mom in sweats to a belly dancer in stage makeup and sequins in like 30 minutes. And it turns out to be so fun and easy, so I agree to perform there regularly. Over time, I volunteered to run cultural assembly programs at the elementary school, working with a couple other moms to expose the kids to art and culture from around the world. The kids' friends love coming over and playing with veils and drums, and especially intrigued by the swords that I balance on my head when I dance. I start performing at a yearly festival in town and have a booth where I teach the community about Arab music and dance. I meet people through the dance community and build friendships and start teaching at the community education program in town. I love using dance to teach women how to confidently walk across a room, to love, appreciate, and be present in their bodies. And I meet some amazing women and love every minute of what I do. But often I feel like a fraud as I struggle with disordered eating, insecurity, and epic body dysmorphia myself. Before we were married, I heard from my teachers that Jim was at a show with them, watching me perform, and said, "Wow, I can't believe I get to marry that woman." But slowly, after our marriage, his tone begins to shift. When I finish a show, he would exuberantly tell me that I did a good job, praising my dancing, before letting me know the things that weren't polished, and how if I just worked on this or that, it would have been great. How much better my performance would have been if my spins were tighter or my arms stronger. People often ask me with a twinkle in their eye about how much my husband must love being married to a belly dancer. The longer we're married, the more likely I would say how he's been around it so long. He was just really technical about it, and how wonderful it is that he gives me constructive criticism. And I believe that. To hear the rest of the story, please like and subscribe. You can also visit my website, Metamorphosis Toolbox, where I have a blog that shares some of my resources and tools that I used to heal and recover and process leaving my abusive relationship. Thank you so much for listening.